The courtroom doors have closed, but the need to understand remains wide open. Part 3 moves from sworn testimony to forensic psychology, asking one question that echoes across every kitchen where tension hides behind polite smiles. Why do some partners murder the people they once vowed to protect? We will map the typology of family annihilators, trace parallel cases over a century, and distill lessons from survivors who escaped before tragedy peaked. Knowledge cannot rewind time for Shanann Watts and her daughters, yet it can illuminate paths that others may still walk toward safety. Understanding motive is not morbid curiosity, it is blueprint analysis, the post-crash dismantling of wreckage so engineers can reinforce bridges that millions will cross tomorrow. Have you ever wondered what warning sign finally convinced you, or someone you know, to leave a dangerous relationship? Share that turning point in the comments so others can recognize it faster. Criminologists generally group family annihilators into 4 overlapping categories, first proposed by Professor Jack Levin: self-righteous, anomic, disappointed, and paranoid. Later scholars added a 5th category labeled coercive-controlling, to capture offenders who murder primarily to maintain absolute dominance. Though labels differ, each pathway blends 3 drivers: perceived loss of control, external stress that threatens identity, and an internal script that frames murder as a twisted solution. Research by the University of Manchester, reviewing 82 cases across Europe, found that 90% of offenders fit at least one primary category, yet fluid movement between types occurs as stressors compound. Self-righteous killers blame a spouse for imagined failures and believe that killing the children best punishes the partner. John List fits this mold. On November 9, 1971, List shot his mother, wife, and 3 teenage children in their mansion in Westfield, New Jersey, then wrote a 5-page letter to his pastor, complaining about debt and moral decay. He turned off lights, tuned a radio to religious music, and disappeared for 18 years. Captured in 1989 after an age-progressed sketch aired on America Most Wanted, he expressed regret only for failing to honor God more quickly. List later explained he feared public assistance would humiliate his family, a paradoxical logic where murder felt kinder than poverty, revealing how warped moral codes can cloak atrocity in paternal language. What reaction does the John List case spark for you? Comment below. Naming emotions can help process complex outrage and grief. An anomic annihilator ties identity to economic success. When status symbols crumble, he erases his family to escape perceived humiliation. Robert Fisher and Neil Entwistle illustrate this path. Fisher, a former firefighter in Scottsdale, Arizona, murdered his wife and 2 children on April 10, 2001, then blew up the house to stall detection. Investigators uncovered maxed credit cards and eviction threats. Fisher remains on the run. Entwistle, a British engineer in Massachusetts, killed his wife and infant daughter in 2006 after secret debts surfaced. Like Chris Watts, both men blamed finances and isolation rather than seek help. Economic autopsy reports note that Watts, Fisher, and Entwistle each held less than $200 in available credit at the time of murder, underscoring the psychological weight of insolvency. Disappointed fathers punish children for failing to meet rigid expectations. Marcus Wesson, who murdered 9 of his children in 2004, preached patriarchal prophecy and incestuous obedience. When police surrounded his Fresno compound, he executed the children rather than relinquish control. Researchers find this subtype most common when ideology merges with social isolation and the killer views offspring as exigentis of ego, not autonomous beings. Criminologist Eric Beauregard writes that disappointed offenders often keep diaries cataloging perceived slights, framing children as failed investments rather than individuals with agency. Paranoid annihilators believe an outside threat looms, losing custody, deportation, or social collapse. Professional wrestler Chris Benoit killed his wife and son in 2007 amid steroid use and job anxiety. For 2 days, he searched Bible verses online, convinced danger was imminent, Psychiatrists call the blend of delusion and grievance a red flag for rapid escalation. In interviews, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Park Dietz recalls many clients fixated on conspiracy forums, illustrating how online echo chambers can accelerate delusional ideation. Coercive-controlling killers do not wait for external stress. Domination itself is the goal. They routinely track phones, isolate partners from friends, and dictate finances. When escape seems imminent, they kill to reclaim absolute power. In 2020, Rowan Baxter burned his estranged wife, Hannah Clark, and their 3 children alive in Brisbane, minutes after breaching a restraining order. Such offenders often stalk for weeks, making threats that friends underestimate because no violent act has yet occurred. Data from Queensland Police show Baxter breached restraining orders 13 times in 6 weeks, yet gaps between jurisdictions delayed real-time alerts, a failure now addressed by centralized databases. Do you believe restraining orders adequately protect victims, or should policy include immediate electronic monitoring of high-risk abusers? Add your stance in the thread to inform lawmakers reading along. Across categories, 3 patterns recur. First, homicidal ideation seldom appears overnight. It builds through rehearsed fantasy. Offenders search terms like escape from marriage without divorce or how to smother quietly. Second, most display a history of non-physical abuse that escalates, belittling language, financial invisibility, or forced isolation. Third, the tipping event is often mundane, such as an upcoming work trip or utility bill, but appears catastrophic through the killer's distorted lens. Threat assessment professionals recommend documenting every minor episode because what looks like isolated anger becomes a predictive pattern when plotted over months. A 2023 National Threat Assessment Center study reviewed 183 family annihilations in the United States since 2010. 71% involved prior domestic complaints, yet only 20% resulted in conviction. 52% of killers expressed suicidal thoughts weeks before the crime, hinting that intervention at suicidal ideation could intercept homicide. Children under 10 accounted for 65% of victims, underscoring their vulnerability where custody battles loom. The same study found that 40% of offenders practiced with weapons or researched body disposal, highlighting premeditation even in crimes later framed as sudden rage. Lawmakers debating next steps investigate therapeutic jurisprudence, where courts tie counseling and debt management to sentencing. Pilot domestic courts in New York reported 30% lower rearrest rates when judges mandated a 6-month course on coercive control. Critics warn about leniency, but supporters say incarceration without rehabilitation merely postpones danger. Similar courts in the United Kingdom now pilot mandatory budgeting classes plus supervised visitation protocols, creating layered accountability that addresses both economic triggers and power misuse around child access. Do you mentor youth or run programs that build emotional resilience? Briefly describe methods that succeed. Practical examples inspire replication in other communities. Early indicators appear far upstream. A 2021 Canadian longitudinal study tracked 3,000 boys for 25 years. Those who witnessed parental violence and experienced consistent rejection were 6 times more likely to commit partner assault as adults. Protective factors, such as mentorship, sports programs that teach emotional regulation, and school-based counseling, reduced that risk by half, showing prevention must start before adolescence. While more than 90% of family annihilators are male, rare female offenders require study. Cases like Medea Yanu in Greece, who drowned her children in 2003, and Julie Schenecker in Florida, who shot her teenagers in 2011, point to distinct motives: altruistic rescue during psychosis or untreated bipolar depression instead of domination. Understanding such differences prevents one-size-fits-all risk tools from missing gendered warning signs. Financial stress operates like carbon monoxide. odorless yet lethal. Economists from the London School of Economics plotted unemployment spikes against domestic homicide in 38 countries between 1990 and 2020 and found a 19% rise during recessions with weak safety nets. The United States showed the sharpest climb, correlating with hospital debt and mental health funding cuts. These numbers suggest policies that forgive catastrophic medical bills may save lives far beyond economic spreadsheets. Neuroscience research offers clues, yet no single biomarker. Functional MRI scans of incarcerated family killers at the University of Oslo showed reduced activity in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the region linked to empathy and future consequence calculation. Participants scored high on entitlement scales of narcissism, but low on classic psychopathy. This pattern supports the theory that annihilators are not thrill seekers. They are desperate ego defenders who fear social extinction more than prison. However, scientists caution that brain scans explain correlation, not destiny, reinforcing that social intervention still matters most. Statistics become urgent when paired with survivor stories. Emily Hurd of Illinois left her husband after he smashed her phone during an argument. A lethality screen administered by deputies rated her risk high, triggering immediate shelter placement. 3 weeks later, officers arrested her ex, hiding outside the shelter with knives and zip ties. She credits the tool with saving her life. In Texas, actor Miguel Cervantes persuaded a colleague contemplating murder-suicide to seek therapy by reframing help as heroic rather than weak. The colleague now mentors others at a Dallas support group. Across interviews, survivors emphasize momentary clarity. A door slam that sounded final, a child's question that pierced denial, proof that split-second intuition often precedes conscious reasoning. Have you or someone you know used a risk assessment tool like the Danger Assessment or LAP? Share how it helped or fell short. Specific experiences guide better practice. Prevention agencies now integrate 3 pillars: data, dialogue, and design. Data means real-time sharing of domestic call histories across jurisdictions, so patterns trigger automatic alerts. Dialogue involves training hairstylists, pharmacists, and postal workers to spot coded pleas for help. Design refers to technology such as smart door locks that message trusted contacts when forced entry occurs. No pillar works alone. Each addresses a gap where tragedy once slipped through. Pilot programs in Maryland, linking 911 call data with health records, reduced repeat domestic calls by 15% within a year. Emerging technology may bolster defense. Researchers at Georgia Tech are testing a wearable bracelet that monitors speech cadence and heart rate variability, alerting users when emotional spikes mirror prior abusive incidents. An early trial with 30 couples showed 90% accuracy, predicting verbal escalation 10 minutes ahead. Critics fear privacy intrusion, but advocates argue real-time biofeedback empowers victims to exit before violence peaks. Developers envision pairing the bracelet with geofencing, so law enforcement receives alerts when signals correspond to a known restraining order violator within 200 meters. Would you wear a biometric alert device if it predicted danger? Or do you feel privacy trade-offs are too steep? Voice your opinion to shape future product design. Cultural scripts also need revision. Many women over 50 were taught to keep peace and avoid publicizing marital troubles. Social media both challenges and reinforces that script. Online groups offer solidarity, yet sometimes shame victims who post grievances. Experts urge shifting language from "why did she stay" to "why did he trap her," placing responsibility on the abuser. This pivot already appears in the 2024 World Health Organization Guidelines on Intimate Partner Violence. Gerontologist Dr. Anna Yo notes that older generations internalize duty narratives, making neighbor check-ins critical because victims may downplay danger to maintain dignity. Consider 3 cases, separated by decades, yet united by motive. 1906. Holly Harvey Crippen poisons wife Cora for an affair, flees by steamship, and becomes the first killer tracked through wireless telegraphy. 1959. Charles Whitman murders his mother and wife before climbing the University of Texas Tower, citing unbearable pressure in a suicide note. 2018. Chris Watts strangles Shanann and smothers daughters to pursue a new relationship debt-free. Across eras, the medium shifts from telegraph to television to TikTok, but the narrative repeats. A man confronts perceived loss of status and turns executioner rather than confront failure. What changes is speed. Crippen's capture took 3 weeks. Whitman's rampage unfolded in 90 minutes. Watts was arrested within 48 hours. Digital footprints now accelerate accountability. Intervention professionals highlight 2 linchpins: accessible mental health care for men and community intolerance for coercive behavior. Countries with universal coverage show lower familicide rates, suggesting therapy access matters. Meanwhile, a 2022 Australian campaign placed posters in hardware stores reading, "Are you buying rope because you are fixing something or because you lost control?" Helpline calls rose 20% during the campaign, indicating provocative messaging can jolt reflection. The campaign's bold tone generated controversy, yet metrics showed that men, not women, accounted for 30% of helpline calls, suggesting shame-based messaging may spur self-referral. Which public awareness campaign struck you as powerful or tone-deaf? Post an example and explain why it worked or failed. Your insight shapes future messaging. Grassroots networks fill gaps where formal agencies lag. In Frederick, Colorado, a neighborhood watch formed after the Watts tragedy now runs monthly check-in circles where residents share mental health resources and discuss conflict de-escalation. Similar circles in Perth, Australia, combine potluck dinners with short workshops on digital safety. Social scientists, tracking 20 such groups across 5 countries, documented a 16% decrease in repeat domestic calls to police within 2 years. The secret, organizers say, is normalizing conversations about relational stress long before someone fears calling 911. By embedding safety in everyday ritual, communities move prevention from emergency rooms into living rooms where early honesty is easier and less costly. Could you host a small gathering that mixes social connection with safety planning? Sketch an idea in the comments. Collective brainstorming turns intent into action. Family annihilation rattles us because it violates the safest archetype we know. Home is sanctuary. Yet the pattern is neither random nor unstoppable. It traces a visible arc of power imbalance, financial stress, and escalating grievance. By decoding that arc and acting early, communities can steer survivors toward escape and compel offenders to seek help before irreversible harm unfolds. Part 4 will examine forensic interviewing of children who witnessed domestic violence and spotlight grassroots programs turning data into direct intervention. Hope lives in these interventions, but only if communities invest attention equal to curiosity, shifting the spotlight from spectacle to early, quiet action. Together, we choose vigilance. As we move forward, pledge one action you will take this month to support someone facing domestic stress. Small commitments, multiplied by many readers, create a safety net statistics alone cannot provide.